in very competitive real estate markets like ours here in the Philadelphia area, we have seen really since the beginning of COVID, the number of bids that win homes that have inspection contingencies plummet. So why? Well, a seller is not interested in an inspection contingency because not only can an inspection mean that the buyer comes back and chips away at the purchase price by saying they want a credit or repairs that the seller doesn't want to deal with or feel like doing, but it also just allows the buyer to terminate and walk away, even if the seller is willing to make the repairs or give a credit. So a seller, at least in our market, is much more likely to take an offer that's not contingent on an inspection, even if it's maybe $10,000 less, or depending on the price point, even a larger amount less than an offer that is contingent on an inspection. That said, understandably, there are a lot of people who say, I'm not handy, I've never owned a home, or I've never owned an older home. I just cannot, in good faith, be able to submit an offer that's not contingent on an inspection. My response to those buyers is first to be honest with them and let them know that in this competitive market, it is going to make their offer less appealing. So how can they try to make up for that? Well, one is obviously make the other terms better, a higher price, a bigger deposit, a settlement date that somehow is more attractive to the seller. But within the inspection contingency itself, there are also a few things that a buyer might choose to do. One is to absorb up to a certain dollar amount of things that are found on the inspection. So let's say the inspector produces the report, and in the section of things that have to be done, which are material defects, things that are not working properly, and or safety hazards, let's say all of the things in that area total $9,800 for the estimate that's given by the inspector. A buyer can say, we'll absorb up to the first $5,000 worth of items found on the inspection report. So in the example I just gave, the maximum they could ask for if they had put that in the contract would be the additional $4,800. And that's if they asked for everything else that the inspector put on that report. Now, another way you can deal with that is to try to communicate to the seller that you're not worried about those little things. You understand it's an old house. You're not going to nickel and dime them over little things, but you want to avoid the possibility of walking in and having a $5,000 repair that has to be done, or a $10,000 replace the furnace kind of thing. So then you can say something like, we the buyer will absorb any and all individual items up to, pick a number, $7,000, which means if there's a $4,000 item that comes up, you're not going to ask for it. A third way is to relinquish your right to the return of deposit monies in the event that you do terminate as a result of the inspections, if there is not as many things on it, or as whatever the total is that you have predicated. So for example, if you said, we'll cover any items up to $4,000, and it turns out that the inspector finds 12 items that are between $3,000 and $4,000, and you say, oh man, we can't ask for that because contractually we said we wouldn't, but I don't want to cover all this, I just want to terminate. Okay, the way the contract reads, if you do that, you get your deposit money back. So adding language that says you will relinquish your right to a deposit if that does not happen, or even if it does happen, if there are all those things, you can give the seller a little bit more comfort. A couple of caveats to this. Recognize that an inspector often gives a range of prices to repair things, and sometimes they just say, have a qualified contractor come in and give you an estimate, because they're not able to estimate it. They don't know in certain instances. So that can put you in sort of a no man's land when you say, well, how much is this? You may not have the time because of your inspection period. You may not have the time to get a stonemason, an electrician, a plumber, whoever it is out there to give you a better estimate. So that can make things a little confusing. Second thing is, when you're talking about an inspection report and what the inspector says is needed, that's not as cut and dried as it would seem, because sometimes they will say something like, Electric is not fully grounded in every outlet, should be repaired. Well, when homes were built before grounded outlets, it's not any kind of code thing. You don't have to bring a house up to code like you would if you built it today. So sometimes it's unclear, well, does that really have to be repaired, or it's just a recommendation? So again, not as cut and dried as it would seem. And finally, and this one's important, if it was disclosed, off the table. If the disclosure said there is a wet basement and you knew that when you submitted your offer, then to have something in the inspection report say it's a wet basement and the estimate to fix it is $3,000, you just have to pretend that's not there, because they already disclosed a wet basement and your offer was made knowing that. So again, mitigating an inspection contingency as far as making it less of a sting to a seller is possible, but recognize that in a very competitive environment, it's an uphill climb. And in general, any inspection contingent offers are going to be put at the bottom of the pile.